I'm personally excited about this panel and this topic. It came up when I chatted first with Kevin around his background and his reflection on some phenomenal career moves that he made that often a lot of people might not be brave enough to make. And I think it's important to look not at the management ladder of moving up the pipeline from design to design and more a senior designer, but maybe you should look at pivoting to different roles in different areas of the business. I'm going to jump straight in to this because there's a lot to get through. Kevin, because you're on my top left, I'm going to start with you. If you could give us a little background on you and your kind of career to date in reflection of the topic.
All right, good. Hi, everyone. This is Kevin Lee, currently Chief Product Officer at eBay Korea, here in Korea. So to the point that was made earlier, I was, and I'm still is, I think, hardcore UX designers. I got educated in the UX, and I spent my last 18 years or so just in UX field in various industries, from healthcare to consumer electronics, consumer goods, e-commerce, and then the payment, and back to the e-commerce now as a product person. So I think today's conversation will be a lot around how do you or need to not just look upward from your own discipline perspective, which is nothing wrong with it, but you should take an opportunity when there is one to boldly decide to go a lateral to a different discipline, because at the end of the day, UX is not a singular discipline responsibility. It's a collection of everyone. So I think, so for me, it's kind of worked out in the right time, right place with the right opportunity that requires my skill set and experience to be worked out. But at the same time, the employer perspective, they also have to look for someone like that will be benefiting. So it has to be mutually agreed and understandable from that sense. But anyway, but that's my short introduction. I look forward to talk to other panelists about some stimulating topics that you guys will find interest.
Yeah, Fatin, how about you? So tell us about your brave move to Australia and being from an engineering perspective.
Thanks, Catherine. So my story is a bit different than Kevin, as I studied telecommunication engineering at university, got my master's degree in telecommunication engineering and programming. Then I landed my first job as a developer, writing code, C# and .NET, as she was saying in the previous talk. My engineering degree and my passion for technology and software development in general led me to my next role as a mobile software engineer. And from there, things changed, as like my next career move was to do support for a SharePoint application at that time. I used a lot of my development skills in working as support engineer, as it helped me a lot in resolving like complex customer issues and troubleshooting. And then from support, I moved again to consultancy role, where I was working with QA testers, training them and providing them like workshops and training sessions on testing tools. And currently I work as a solution engineer at GitHub, where I work very closely with the sales team at GitHub. And I work with customers in APAC, from small businesses to enterprises all over APAC. So you can see that in my journey is very different, as I started developer, support, consultancy, trainer, solution engineer. But one common thing between all my different roles is that it's always around the software development lifecycle. It's always the software development and technology is at the heart, at the center of all the different roles that I took. And I like the diversity of what I'm doing right now. And at the same time, I feel I can bring a lot from my development skills that I use in my current job, as well as in my previous job. So I always used my technical skills. I always brought my authentic knowledge and skills into every single job that I took. But as you can see, it's not all the same. This is kind of a summary of my career progress. And as I mentioned, it's all around the software development lifecycle. And I feel that having that diversity and that knowledge helps me to bring something very different, a different perspective to the table, something new that other people might not have the privilege to have.
Sorry, and yeah, that's really great, Faten. And Ash, can you talk about your move from India to the US and then back to and then to Singapore? Kind of similar reflection almost to what Kevin has been doing.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Kathy. A quick introduction of me. I'm Ashwin. I'm the Senior Director of Product for Food Panda Singapore. And I agree with Kevin, right? There's nothing wrong in moving lateral in your own function. My journey, I'm from a middle-class family in India. Like every brown parent, they forced me to become an engineer. Fortunately, I became a good one. And ended up in the US, like every brown kid dreams, right? I was in IBM, typical software consulting services company. I have a bit of a funny story how I moved from engineering to product. Naturally, I'm a very curious person. Back in the days, about 16, 17 years ago, engineers were treated as people who just code. They don't need to know the why, right? Here is your task, go code. Yeah, funny, those .NET languages, Microsoft DFS. And every time there was a new task given to me, I would go and ask my manager, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? Why? And everything comes in, I have 100 questions for him. So he couldn't take those questions. And he was like, look, there is an opening in the business analytics team where they need an engineer because they don't understand the engineering point. And naturally, you're curious, why not you move there? I was like, okay, let's try that. So I moved into business analyst. Back in the days, business analyst was the fancy name for product. And when I went to the team, I realized that the importance of knowing why, because what I was doing was completely different than the why, right? I could not connect what metrics and business impact we are trying to drive from the engineering side. And in the previous, and Shadil was saying, engineers were not involved in the early discussion and sessions, and so wasn't I involved. And that's how I started my, say, product journey, understanding UX, importance of design, importance of business metrics, how do you engage the customers? And I took a lot of risks in my life without thinking what's going to happen, right? I was in a very safe space of IBM, consulting, no job security. I was trying to explore what it means to be in product. So I made a couple of good moves. Some were good, some were bad. And in the US, I traveled around all of the small startup companies because started just happening there back then. Realized, okay, some are founder-led companies, some don't understand what you want to do. And then Rocket happened to me where they were starting Zalora in Southeast Asia. And that's when my first true learning started as a product guy, because I understood how the business is run, how the product needs to be built for the consumers. And of course, being from an engineering background helps to decide how you want to build a software product. And naturally, I was with a lot of diverse set of people where I learned that there's a different ideas coming through which can actually be implemented, which engineers are unaware of, right? That's been my journey, and I've been in Singapore for 7 years, and I'm still learning about the culture, the people, the customers, the product that you build. That's a very, very, very short and sweet experience of my last 17 years.
I can relate a lot, especially that moving from India to US to Singapore. For me, it was moving from Lebanon to Australia and having the same, when you're getting an engineering degree, because back home there's more unemployment and you need to be more educated. And then when you first move here, it was easier to write code than having any customer facing challenges. So that was very similar. So I can relate a lot. I've used C#, TFS all days, but now at least it's all on GitHub, no more TFS.
the joys of changes.
Yeah, true.
I have a few things to ask around the companies that you've worked for, but I'll ask Kevin first, just because you mentioned something in the beginning around companies need to meet in the middle, and I thought that was a very interesting point. So I believe, could you elaborate more on what you meant by that?
Yeah, so I think I feel, first of all, I feel a little bad that my main intro was very short and compared to Fatin and Ashwan. So I'll try to catch up here. And I assume that the audience is a mix of, designers and, software engineers or products. So I'll just address as a generalist. But I think when I meant by the companies to meet in halfway, I think we all are, as a panelist, and especially myself, been in an interview from an interviewee perspective, also interviewer perspective, I don't know, probably 1,000 times already in my career. And what you see nowadays, especially as I move from full-time design leaders to a full-time now CPO or product leader, is that there are a growing number of companies who start to realize that, as I said before, experience, customer experience isn't necessarily owned by or responsible by a chief design officer, which many companies start to have, which means that there's recognition of importance of it. But having said that, we all know, and this is something that I always talk about, in order to build a product and ship the product, no single discipline can do it, right? Designers can do at best building a design prototype. It validates it, but that's it. They cannot write a code like software engineers do. So there's no way that design alone can build a product and ship the product, let alone product managers that can build these great use cases, right? Edge cases, understand customers and translate the business requirements and put a KPI around it. But that's it. That's all they can do. And the software engineers, they're the little dangerous people where they can actually code and they can do some UX around it, but end up building a very bad user experience. Because no offense, but they need to properly understand the user experience of it. So when these three disciplines come together, this is where the magic happens. And employer perspective, they used to look at, like Ashwan's case, right? That great software engineers, great technical background, and doing a product leadership role. So why don't you do this? And which is a really large portion of IT companies doing that trend. And what I've seen recently is that while they're doing it, they start recognizing the lack of truly understanding end-to-end customer experience. And this isn't about how the UI is rendered. This isn't about how a single little piece of widget that needs to be a function that creates a CTR or CVR or the KPI. This is really about understanding the needs of the customer from end-to-end perspective. And I think, for my case, I think my biggest takeaway from my own transitioning experience is that regardless of your product background or engineering background or the design background, once you have to have this basic level of CPS to KPI short translation, like customer problem statement, and as Ashwan talked about, I definitely relate to it. It doesn't matter. You can be the greatest designer in the world. If your customer understanding ends up with just pretty pictures, I hate the word, by the way, but I have to use it to stimulate the audience. If you end up just pretty pictures, you are nowhere near being a great designer. You're just an artist. Now, if you're just engineers who loves to write 10,000 lines of code when someone else can write 20,000 lines of code, great, but doesn't mean that you are the greatest software engineers and product managers as well. So I think when you have to have this connection between, I know the clear customer problem statement, and I know how this ties to the business KPI, whether it's GMV, whether it's the click rate, whether it's a conversion, whatever that is, which is really the foreign language to a lot of designers, to be honest, less so for the engineers and the product managers. That's where you start to get very blurred with your core competency. But often in the past, it's been viewed as, don't go there. You want to be specialist. And then there's still a lot of side of debates about being generalist is good. But I think it's not about the argument between specialists and generalists. It's just core competency nowadays required by many companies. So I think my success of making transition wasn't necessarily about how I have a very good track record as a design leader, but it's rather through the work that I've done as a design leader, I always have this connection that I always ask that question, like Ashwin, you're saying, I always ask why. And then I always ask the other way around, why this great user experience doesn't add up to be the great product launch? And I would try to connect that dot between, and that forced me to understand customer needs to a business needs. And those two things aren't necessarily the same thing. And when you're able to connect that, I think making that lateral move becomes very natural, not necessarily by your eyes first, but by the employer, because they see you as a, oh, I didn't know that you were able to do this through the conversation. And that conversation leads you to, would you like to, something that you never expected to, but that's where the open door opportunity for a lot of things that you just shutting down because you always look for, design specific career or engineer specific career, which is, not to say that it's wrong, but I think the world of opportunities are much greater than your own discipline, if that's what you're looking to do in your career. So
I think, Ash, you had a similar story to that from your failure piece on your old boss back in the day when you were in your developer role. I think you could probably say a little add to that.
Yes, I would agree to that. And those days are gone, right? Back in the days, as I said earlier, engineers were not involved. We didn't know what was happening. But over the period of time, this magic has started to happen where engineers have started taking more interest in the business KPIs and how we want to do. And over time, they've become so smart to disconnect the business KPI with the customer KPIs, right? I deal on it every day. And in a very similar way, product designers have sort of become half product managers. They are focusing a lot on the customer journeys and customer KPI, but when they do their discovery work, when they go ahead and ask these questions, we realize that there is a gap between what business wants to achieve and what customer wants, right? And there comes a challenge where, okay, should we focus on customer needs or should we focus on business needs? Let's just be honest, right? We all say in all of the fancy interviews, we need to focus on the customer. In the end, in the four closed door in the board meeting, like, look, this is the business metric. We need to drive GMV. We need to drive, I don't know, conversion rate. And we make decisions on behalf of customers, right? And then that's one spectrum. The other end of the spectrum are people like Steve Jobs, who said, customer don't know what they want until you give them what they want, right? So there are two extremes, and how do you bring these together? It's been a challenge. It's an eternal challenge, and I've learned that perfect product never exists. It just evolves over a period of time. And as I said, I learn every day. We operate in 12 diverse markets, and it's very difficult to build a product which is consumer centric. And now we are in an era where a lot of product designers wants to move laterally in product management because they think that's valuable, and vice versa. And we also have a case where engineers say, look, I enjoy coding, but I think I'm more valuable if I become a designer and the product. So these organizational move, people are leaving their core skill set and trying to explore a different function is exciting, because as Kevin said, that's where magic starts to happen, because now I have a person who is an engineer, but is a product manager too, and he could create magic, right? And vice versa with design and product.
I mean, if I just add a few things just to what Ashwin said, and I'm going to relate to what Patton said about software lifecycle, right? Or product development lifecycle. I think that's a perfect metaphor. Every single stages of those lifecycle, you have to have a different skill set. So that's something that we all need to have in our head. No single person or team is more important than the others. They all need to come in at the right place, right time to work together. And I think I'll give you an example. We recently made a massive platform change on one of the flagship app, the e-commerce app here in eBay Korea. And that required back-end engineers to work together with the front end, but also the user experience team and the product management team. Here's one point where Ashwin, you said connecting the dot is very difficult. Now, of course, just like any other company, we launched the customer journey map exercise, massive, a couple hundred customers, interviews and immersions, all this stuff. We've done it, checkbox, right? You extracted this beautiful insights that almost give you goosebumps. Man, if we're able to build this way, we're going to be winning the market. And as you go into that development, engineers start coming up with all these reasons why we couldn't do it, right? It could be platform reasons. It could be just taking too long. We did the wrong t-shirt sizing exercise, right? Or the edge cases come up that put you delay mode. All these things, something that most of the designers don't understand or do not want to understand, because they're focused on the face value of a UI UX. But that's not the product. That is just a cover, right? It's almost like a cover of the book, right? Now you need to make users open the cover of the book, which it does require great UX, but now you have to go into contents. Content that has been rendered at the right speed, right? Because the loading time, if it's too slow, you're gonna lose your customers. So all those things, sometimes designers don't have preview to it, nor interest to understand that. And then they instead put a blame on software engineers to not doing their job. But in fact, they're doing best they can do to make it happen. And then product managers being squeezed in between, being a translator, getting blamed from designers, and turn around and telling engineers what to do. And the engineers are telling product managers, stop blaming us because you have to write the right use cases to scope it right, all this stuff. My point is that I think, to Asian's point, it's very important for us to understand that when you have the totality of the view, that's when you are ready for the next job, not vertically, but laterally. Because don't be afraid of having that moment of truth where, OMG, I am now thinking like a product manager. How dare I ever think like product manager? I'm a designer, or vice versa. Embrace that change that organically came up to you. And that's a signal that you need to start jump, not up, but jump to the next door of your other companies that you hope that you want to make more contribution because now you're ready. So I think I just want to share that there's evidence within yourself that tell you all these times that you are ready to jump to the lateral, and you are the one who's stopping you from making that. So that's a very important realization.
Just to add on to that, you've touched on parallel and vertical moves, right? At least in Asia, in last 7 years of my life in Asia, I've learned that people, regardless of what they want to do, they look for a vertical move, right? It's an Asian culture where you want to be leading people, you want to be managing people, and they connect as a sense of pride, right? It's an Asian culture, right? I'm not generalizing it, but as far as I understand Southeast Asia, Asia Pacific, the thing that, okay, that sense of pride, I'm managing such a huge team, etc., etc. It's run behind excellence. Success would follow you, right? What these younger generation millennials are trying to do is not learn the art or skill and master that. Rather, they are too focused on just going up the ladder as fast as possible without acquiring that knowledge. And that's very important. As an individual, you need to take a step back and see, what do you enjoy in your day-to-day life, right? Is that something that you wake up in the morning and that excites you, right? That's missing in majority of the people, as everybody, at least in my team, right, in my previous companies, everybody's at least 95, 98% of the people are looking for that vertical move rather than a lateral move where they could be actually a good product designer, engineer, or a product manager, right? That's something is a growing concern for me as an individual, because people are leaving their core skill set and which they are good at and just running behind success, and they treat success as managing team, people, fancy titles, and leading the teams.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. You're 100% right, as like fancy titles and salary are the main goals for everyone looking for their next career move. But at the same time, especially with COVID and post-COVID, as you mentioned, like being motivated, being happy in what you're doing, that job satisfaction that you get from doing the job is very important. So you can be really good hire and you can be really good at what you're doing. And there are few other factors, like for me, having the flexibility, having a work-life balance. These are important factors for me because like with a young family, these are extra factors that I look and take into consideration when I'm thinking about my next career move. It's not just about the job title or the salary. So some people will be like, I want to become a manager, and sometimes managing other people, it's not made for everyone. It's not something that anyone have the skill set to be dealing with other people and managing and leading teams. And some people might be just want to deep dive into one specific topic or domain and become the subject matter expert. And that's fine because we need their expertise as well. And these are very valuable. I've seen a coworker who didn't want to get into management role just because he really likes to stay technical. He really liked to be writing code, and that's what keeps him motivated. And he was like trying his best not to get into management roles even after years of experience, just because he was into coding and more motivated from that side. So it's I feel like there's no one fit for everyone. Some people might get into management roles, some people might become subject matter expert in specific but for me, my experience was different. As I mentioned, I took lots of different hats, but all around software. And I feel like having that general knowledge about all of the different roles is very valuable for that I can bring that value to the team.
Yeah, I think Faten, your experience of moving career has been very good. You've used the engineering side when there was language barriers. You've taken a lot of things as opportunities, and I think that's an important one to share with people.
Yeah, that's correct. I originally come from Lebanon, and then I got my first job in Australia. So coming here at the beginning, it was easier for me to just write code because I wasn't ready to do any customer facing challenges. And then later on, when I became more comfortable, more confident, I really enjoyed customer facing experience. And I'm like, I wanted to do more of that. And as you can see, from support and training and consultancy, so they're all roles that needs a combination of technical skills plus having that customer experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's just a comment here, not a question, from Sigit. Kevin, we need more leaders like you. And I think that it is a good point. And it sings back to what you were saying about the companies need to take ownership of growing, getting the all-rounded person, I think is what you're all trying to say.
And I think I appreciate the comment. And if I just return the comment with my favor to all of you, sometimes I use this tactic in my own interview process because, again, I am, from a sense of employer perspective, prospect, right? I'm the candidate. So I do have to do interviews. And but whenever I do and have an opportunity to do so, I always use tactic of I ask people that I'm talking to their background. This is something that usually they don't talk about, right? They want to know your background because you are the interviewee, you are the interviewer. But I always ask as interviewee, so tell me about your background, Mr. or Miss X. And then they were stunned at first because who's asking question who? But I want to know because I want to know the compatibility. If you are coming from very diverse background, now I can work with you, right? Of course, I don't tell them, but I know in my heart. Because sometimes we look for the face value of entitlement or the company. There's nothing wrong with that, right? We do need it at some point to give you the platform to grow, whether vertically or laterally. But at some point, as I call it, get matured. That's not the only thing that you're looking for, as Faten said, right? And I think the way to find out is in the interview process, ask where they come from, what kind of track that they came into their own role that they are doing now. Because when you are working with people that have a similar thinking pattern, that's really exciting. That's really fun. Doesn't matter you are the manager or the individual contributor, you're having fun. And I think that's most important at work. But if you're only looking for fast value, you're gonna be mostly struggling within a year, and you're gonna look for a different job. And it's a loss for the company, and it's a loss for yourself because you are not actually learning much other than wasting your time sulking around. So I think that's something I would ask everyone to think about, that you do look for your career advancement, but to do it, make sure that who you are working with and their backgrounds, because that's something that will give you the silver bullet for what you might be not looking for, even though that may be something that you were tempted to look for. So
can I add just one more thing? That's so true, because if everyone, even for the organization, if everyone shares the same background and perspective, they're not going to have the opportunity to be innovative. They're not going to be able to have that unique environment. They're not going to have different opinions, because like different opinions are the ones are going to lead to new ideas. So diversity is very important. I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are literally out of time. I will quickly ask you to, if you go to Slack, all three of you, and please write down in one very short sentence, what's the key takeaway you want to take from that, and put that in the Ask the Speakers channel. Thank you to Kevin, Ash, and Faten. You are, all three of you are wonderful. And I will sign off for now.